Hello, Leigh. Welcome back.
Hello. I am, full disclosure, if my voice is a touch gravelly, dear listener, today, I was at karaoke last night, singing my absolute heart out to the Cranberries' Zombie last night. And Dolores O'Riordan, I am not. Turns out that is quite a vocally challenging song.
Who'd have thought? Who'd have thought? I love that for you, Leigh. I'm really glad. I am scared of karaoke. I've never done karaoke.
Oh, I need you to know that I was at a party where I knew 3 people. And I was in a karaoke booth booked for 30.
So you just kept a low profile, chose a really low impact song, something very laid back. Like
I didn't even choose the Cranberries. Some other people, English people did, and they were simply not doing it justice.
Yeah, I mean,
a straight white man was changing the lyrics.
Oh.
And instead of saying zombie, you know when it goes zombie, zombie,
famously, yeah, iconic.
He was going horny.
No.
Which was an insult to my nation, quite frankly.
And to Dolores.
And to Dolores, and to the Troubles. Like, you can fuck right off.
Let's just have a bit of... Well, I mean, bringing the right energy today, Leigh, to this episode of Queer Gals Watch the West Wing.
Yes, we are following our patrons' instructions on Patreon. We asked them what was the best order to do these episodes in, and you answered, dear patrons, and you said we needed to watch Manchester Part 1, Manchester Part 2, because they are kind of a seamless continuation of the season 2 finale episode and very much stand together as a whole piece. And then we needed to come to Isaac and Ishmael, which is kind of separate, standalone play.
To use a phrase. What we're going to do is we're just going to jump straight into an episode recap.
Yeah.
This is kind of a special episode of TV. So this episode was written, produced and filmed in less than 2 weeks.
Mad.
Which is crazy, and was the show's like personal response to the wake of the attacks on September 11th, 2001 in America.
I think there is an interesting conversation to be had about how various shows at the time addressed it. Because famously we have long-running shows that all had different ways of kind of facing it. Whether it be, I think in Friends, obviously that's set in New York, the following season they're all wearing kind of New York Police Department and NYPD sweatshirts and t-shirts, and it's a very like subtle nod. I think the writers on Friends basically were like, it doesn't feel right for the tone of this show to actually bring that into this world.
Yeah, but this is how we're standing with people.
And Sex and the City, I think they started dressing them in a lot of red, white and blue.
Yes, I remember that.
But again, they chose not to bring it into the world of the show. So I was really intrigued to see what this episode would be. Because it's a tough call for a show that is...
For a show that has discussed terrorism and responses to terrorism within its narrative already.
And is overtly about politics. Yeah,
there's no escaping it. And so I think actually doing a standalone episode was kind of the greatest way for the show to acknowledge that, you know, we're a TV show. You know, this is made up and silly and we play characters. And what's happening in the world is real and has consequences. And so we're going to keep making our TV show. But like what is happening is something that's unprecedented. And I think on my DVD, it kind of did it a couple of times, but I think they bought the advertising slots. So instead of adverts, it was just where people could donate. And obviously because it's a standalone episode, there was no previously on in this episode because it kind of sits outside of the show's continuity in a way. And so we open this episode of The West Wing with some like very gentle score, which immediately kind of is quite emotive. And then kind of vox pops with all the actors being themselves, but in costume.
Yeah.
And they're them kind of explaining why they're doing it and why it's important, which was very moving. And I can imagine at the time...
hugely comforting, like for an American public that was traumatized in this moment.
Yeah.
I imagine it felt very unifying.
Yeah, and like you said in our shared doc, like I've got shivers from John Spencer. It was, and I think the thing that was really nice is, you know, we love this show, and one of the reasons why we love it is that the actors disappear into these amazing, multifaceted characters who feel real and feel like we know them. And there was something, like you say, Leigh, very comforting about those actors dropping all of that.
Yes.
And being like, we're just here with you.
And the tone that they all managed to reach was like, hey, we're your friends. You know us. I think they struck a really lovely tone with it. All of the actors do. And it must have been a really tough call. I mean, like, I did not live in America when 9/11 happened. You and I were both very small.
Yeah.
But I can only imagine as like an adult living in America that it was an incredibly scary time.
Yeah. And so suddenly those TV shows that are airing once a week that you like, I know that I'm in on such and such a night, and me and my housemate get pizza and we sit and we watch The West Wing. Suddenly that has even more importance because it's it's normalcy, it's routine. And like in moments of extreme tragedy, you can imagine that those anchors in your kind of like weekly viewing would become so important.
Yes.
And so I thought it was phenomenally earnest, is how I'll describe it, when we had the line from Bradley Whitford, which is, tonight we present a play.
And of course it was Bradley. Of course it was Bradley.
It was key that it was him.
Yes. Now, and I don't want this to come across as in any way disrespectful, I think.
No,
like, you know, obviously it's like, I had friends in high school whose parents luckily survived the being in the Twin Towers on that day. Obviously, it's responding to something incredibly traumatic and tragic and a really tragic moment for people. But I simply couldn't with tonight we present a play. I was like, okay, Bard. Okay, Shakespeare's Globe.
And I would love to put a kind of like PSA at the top of this, which is I loved this episode.
Yes,
I thought
agreed.
It was gorgeous. I thought the writing was extraordinary. I felt very comforted and cocooned in the kind of political moment that we're in presently watching this. But what I did feel, and actually I also found very comforting, but on a very, very small scale, like slightly amusing, was just, yes, the arts. And we will be here to lead us through these difficult times through art and the spoken word. And that's important.
We should premise me and Fi, like kind of slightly poking fun at the earnestness of this, is that we have both worked with many theater professionals who truly believe that they are kind of doing the Lord's work in an agnostic sense.
That they're making changes politically.
That they're making change. They truly believe that they are change makers. And I think me and Fi are very firmly of the camp of like, we're going to do work that we believe in, that says something we believe in. We also are aware that what we do is quite silly much of the time.
Yeah.
And so we endeavor not to believe that we are the equivalent of kind of a negotiator for the UN.
For sure. And I think if I met up for Aaron Sorkin with a coffee at the end of that second week, I think I would be meeting a guy who is probably, let's say, frazzled to say the least. And so I'm going to forgive him some of the more earnest, worthy and all-knowing moments of this episode and just allow them to be, I think, what they were intended to be, which was just comforting. And, and there is something very safe about the kind of like, yes, there are bad guys and there are good guys. Like sometimes we need that. Like that's why we love films like Independence Day.
Yes.
You know, that's why that kind of popcorn movie, good guys, bad guys works, and why stories where it's like the young people being like, but what is such and such? And the smart, intelligent people being like, wow, now you've asked me that question. I'm really thinking about it. So that's why it's important, because it's safe space.
Absolutely.
Now, what they did do in this kind of opening moment where everyone was being themselves, but kind of also being their characters.
Absolutely unforgivable. Unforgivable.
Leigh was outraged about this, but I actually thought it was genius, which is at a time when everyone's like very present and very much like, how am I going to get through the day? They teased the whole series. They did like a little line from everyone where they were like, and this thing happens, and maybe this thing happens. And obviously they ended that with Donna going, and I get a boyfriend.
I was beside myself. I was screaming, you tease, Aaron Sorkin, you tease.
But isn't that brilliant? It's like, if you've had, you know, possibly one of the worst weeks of your entire life, and then, you know, your comfort show is like, that thing you really wanted to happen is going to happen this series. You'd go, okay, all right.
Never said it was going to be Josh, though, did she?
No. Thrilled. But yes, that was very unfair, Aaron. We opened the episode with a particular kind of group in a tech space, is how I'll describe it, kind of recognizing and looking up a potential terrorist threat to the United States. I should have listened more to what they were saying, but I was so distracted by the incredible computer graphics and like search engine that was being used, and like this gorgeous nostalgia for that, like, again, to say it, like a very Independence Day-esque, like I type a name into a search engine and then it goes like diggly 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 dig, and then it like comes up with like mugshots.
When the internet made noise.
Yes. Yeah. Truly. So I enjoyed that. But it transpired that there's a particular person that they think is a threat to national security. And dun, 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 they work at the White House.
Whoa.
Cut to Josh Lyman trying to leave the office at 5.
And Donna Moss looking frankly incredible in like, it's like a long sleeve red blouse and like plaid slacks, but like very figure hugging. She looks incredible.
She does look great. And he's kind of trying to leave. He's got his little backpack on, and she's like, well, haven't you forgotten what's on your schedule? And it turns out that there's this selection of high school kids from across America who basically kind of like apply to be in and do lots of extra credit and stuff to go to Washington for a week, to DC, and kind of meet influential people and get careers advice and stuff. The presidential classroom.
Yes.
And she's like, well, you promised you'd speak to them. And he's like, oh, sigh. And like throws his bag at her and like stomps off to go and meet these kids. And as he's like walking in and being like, so I guess like I'm Josh Lyman and like I'm really important, Donna goes, Josh, and points to a red phone.
An actual red phone.
Like flashing. And then he picks up the phone and finds out that the whole of the White House is going into lockdown. And I think that as a kind of format for this special standalone episode is brilliant.
Genius.
Yeah, we're all locked in, so we're just going to have to confront how we're feeling about the way that we're feeling.
Yeah. And to give Aaron Sorkin credit, it is very a play. We're adhering to all of our classical rules of drama. It's almost happening in real time.
Yeah.
We're all trapped in a space together.
It's very a play.
Lovely.
We then go to the mess. Love that we're being locked down in the mess. I also think that's very a play, that like we kind of have one set.
Yes. And we kind of have like Toby's and or Josh at various points, like with a knee up on a chair, just like speaking to you like I'm just a cool guy. I'm just a regular guy.
Just drinking a carton of juice, you know? Just Uncle Toby. We have also what I think is cracking is the choice of the particular young people to put in this episode as like very well read, very earnest. Like I've read all my books about the Constitution, kids. Like kind of schooling all of our characters, which I think is really fun.
Yeah. So fun. And I knew as soon as Josh Lyman was like the executive branch, the most powerful branch of government, it's like, no. These kids are going to read you for filth for that, Josh. That was like bait.
For example?
Actually, Mr. Lyman, isn't it true that the framers made sure that the executive branch was the weakest of the three branches because we were breaking off from the royalist model that put absolute power in one place? I mean, isn't that why they made the legislative branch or people's branch the most powerful? Now, that is a real nugget for true wingnuts because we've seen Josh have a loathing for Congress so many times and abhor dealing with Congress. So it's a real wound to his ego that this kid is saying the legislative branch is more powerful.
It's wonderful for him to get taken down by a child, and like he does like then has like a funny back and forth for the rest of the episode with this particular kid. But what I do love is that he also has a moment of realization here where he's like, oh, I have a captive audience of adoring fans.
For sure. I also got the sense that Bradley Whitford as an actor had a lovely day shooting this.
Agreed. And he's doing a really, like, he's kind of being Josh Lyman about it, and he keeps getting side eye from Donna being like, you need to be kind, like the kids are scared, like this is scary. Because he's like, this happens all the time. And Donna's like, that's not reassuring to children. And so he's like trying to be reassuring and kind to them and being like, well, you know, I know a little while back I got shot a little bit. Like you had a life-threatening injury.
I got shot a little bit. It was like a 6 to 8 month recovery.
So funny. And then he starts, I think in that section, he's kind of weirdly talking about, he's like, oh, my family have this tendency to like die too soon, with reference to his sister who died in a fire as a child and his
Joni.
And his dad who died of cancer.
Famously during the first campaign.
Yeah. And so I'm like, this is kind of heavy for you to be talking through your relationship with death and your relationship with your mother with essentially children. But what he kind of does is says, hey, we've got a period of time here. Ask me any question.
An AMA, if you will.
Yeah, which I think is, again, excellent framework. So a lot of them are like talking about like who the bad guys are and who should we hate. And actually, there's a really interesting conversation that surrounds like Josh asking them to interrogate the difference between Islamic people and Islamic extremism. And I think that argument or that conversation for young people hasn't lost its simplicity, importance, or relevance in 24 years. And so watching that in 2025 and thinking about that being televised in 2001, I was like, wow, like that would have been such a worthwhile topic to share on television.
Oh, absolutely.
But equally now, you know, in modern day Britain, I see that being a useful thing to be discussed at school. So I found the whole way through interesting how this episode has aged, you know, over more than 2 decades.
No, 100%. And you can see how like what was happening in this episode would have been actually like a real public service in 2001, 100%.
Donna tries to make a point. It's kind of quite Donna-ish. You know how she likes to kind of be quite broad?
Yes.
As we know, she's a libertarian.
Famously. I will say that I didn't love, and I know it was meant to be cute, I didn't find it cute, that in front of a room full of people, Josh says she does have a point, albeit college girlish. What exactly is that supposed to mean, Josh?
It's classic, isn't it? The only kind of redeeming quality to that is that her comeback was, watch now as he's going to put me down and make my point at the exact same time.
Apparently, Donna Moss is responsible for giving us the phrase mansplaining, which was incredible in 2001.
Stunning, yeah. I had no notes on that because I was just like, I think that happens so often when she's like, so it's this thing? And he's like, no, it's not. And then proceeds to describe kind of in more detail what she sort of said in layman's terms.
It was at this point that I was like, I simply must see Toby in this room.
Yes. Also, Leigh, everyone has apple and peanut butter, which is your favorite snack. So we kind of stay for the most part in this episode in the mess, but we do occasionally flip to in the old executive office building where we see lovely Ron from the Secret Service.
Lovely Ron, but in action. Serious Ron.
Very serious. And Ron detaining a guy called Rakeem Ali, who works in the executive office, because he has the same name as one of the sources that has come up in this kind of Secret Service search right at the start of the show. And they were like, there's 3 Rakeem Alis. One of them is working at the White House. So I'm assuming that then Secret Service agents went to detain all 3 of these men. And we're following the one that's in the White House. Leigh, I think your instincts right at the start were correct.
Yes, I immediately felt that Rakeem was going to be an innocent guy with the wrong name at the wrong time. It felt like the logical, dramatic place to go.
Yeah.
And also, I grew up with a dad whose name would come up at the airport because there was somebody in the IRA with the same name as my dad. And every single time he'd get selected for extra security clearances at the airport until they would then confirm that his middle name was different from that person.
Yeah. And I know that, like, you mentioned the shared doc, like, it all feels a bit didactic, but I would love to believe that in 2025 we've moved on from like racial profiling in workplaces. But I honestly just don't think that we have.
No.
And currently in the UK right now, it feels like racism and Islamophobia is growing literally every day across the UK. And I can imagine that having a certain name and looking a certain way is no less complicated in kind of summer 2025 than it probably was in 2001.
100%. I also am absolutely sure that, you know, while my dad had the same name as somebody who was in the IRA and therefore he would get flagged, I know for sure that, like, in the 2000s, as a white man who was often traveling for business, you know, as much as he was being flagged for extra security clearances, you know, he was much more often being given the benefit of the doubt than not. And, you know, it was at the end of the security clearance, it was, sorry for any inconvenience, sir. You know, so it's like, so as much as he was being flagged because of his name, he was also like a white man with an Irish accent. So like, it's interesting. And I think the whole kind of scene that plays out between Rakeem and Leah McGarry through this episode is a really smart and complex depiction of fear, internalized racism, changing international policy, and I think intergenerational responses to kind of global events. Because I think that's what's so smart about the fact that they brought the children characters in, is that we've got teenagers, younger members of staff like Donna, then older members of staff like Toby, and then like people who served in wars like Leo. So we've got this full breadth of response to terrorism. And I think that's what I find really interesting about Leo's interrogation of Rakeem Ali, is I'm like, there's a different experience of life that Leo has that has built up prejudices and certain types of racism within him that he has to really confront at the end of this episode. Yeah, which I love that John Spencer, as an actor, was willing for his character to be the one who has to confront his own internalized racism. Also, like, I think my saying that, like, some of it feels kind of didactic in 2025, but in 2001, obviously, it's a different story. I think I don't mean that it's not relevant today. I just think
for sure.
in the way that it's done, I think it might be done slightly differently today.
Yeah, because it does feel slightly on the nose.
Yes, exactly.
Here.
Yes.
Yeah. But let's swing back, because Toby does, in fact, join the children to also have apple and peanut butter. He kind of has a bit of like back and forth with the kids. They ask him some questions. He has some really fantastic things to say. I pulled one out, which I really enjoyed, which is, there's nothing wrong with a religion whose laws say a man's got to wear a beard or cover his head or wear a collar. It's when violation of these laws becomes a crime against the state and not against your parents that we're talking about a lack of choice, which was gorgeous. Toby's kind of moment of clarity was quite undercut by the arrival of Sam Seaborn.
An insane entrance from Sam Seaborn. Absolutely insane. Just kind of apropos to nothing. I think it is kind of vaguely triggered by something Toby has just said, but it's still not in any way justified. Basically, Sam Seaborn just announces, unprompted, to the room, temptation, I have named thee, and thy is woman.
It's so bold and a really really bombastic delivery of the line as well, I have to say. I think it's
Rob Lowe really went for it.
He was like, my entrance line, my cue. I think Toby had been talking about how women's rights and freedoms in Iraq had been like slowly eroded over time. And that was sort of Sam's response.
Imagine being a teenage girl and you've come to the West Wing because you're like so incredibly smart and you've done extracurriculars to like get to come and meet the Deputy White House Chief of Staff. And suddenly you're in a room where one of the president's scriptwriters is just screaming at you, temptation, thy name is woman. You'd be like, is this the adult world? Like,
are you okay? Someone get that man a yogurt.
A yogurt.
There was a really nice sign off at the end of that scene where like Toby's had like actually a very fruitful conversation with these kids, and he's just kind of classically rolling his eyes, and he's like, now I'm just stuck here with well-dressed children who can't vote.
Oh, I'm obsessed. Yeah, that was so good.
Yeah, and you're like, it makes so much sense when you're like talking to the younger generation and they're saying all these really smart, informed things, and you're like, you can't even vote for us in the next election.
Yeah.
I would love to know who those kids were in real life and if they were all child actors. And also, like, I would love to read interviews of like when they'd come in that day and like what it was like filming that and being in the room.
Also, I think the casting of those kids was pretty well done in that they do kind of represent America. It's not like we're looking at a room full of white kids, you know?
Or like even like private school kids.
Yeah.
We'll touch base with Leah's interrogation again. I think that the actor who comes in and guest stars as Rakeem Ali is fantastic.
And I did want to make a point as well that I love that as an actor of Middle Eastern heritage in 2001, he was getting to play a role that was not playing a terrorist, you know, because my friends who are actors and performers who are of Middle Eastern heritage, even today, struggle to get seen for roles that are not those roles.
Yeah.
So I love that this actor got to come in and do this work. Obviously, it's still thematically about the same thing, but that he's getting to portray a different side of his community and getting to play a part with kind of dignity and gravitas opposite a real powerhouse actor.
Yeah. So having this discussion and Leo's kind of asking him questions about like where he grew up and like what his parents did and various kind of like quite personal information that's definitely from security files. And Rakeem says, Mr. McGarry, I understand the need for these questions, and I hope you've noticed I've been cooperating. But if you drag my father into this pitiful exercise, I'm afraid I'm going to get angry. To which Leo responds, I don't think you understand the seriousness of what's happening right now. And Rakeem's comeback to that is, I don't think that you do.
Yeah.
Which is phenomenal. And it feels like Leo McGarry has come into your office. Like the power imbalance there is so clear. Like he's the president's guy. You know, he's the chief of staff.
That actor does an incredible job when John Spencer walks into the room of giving Leo so much status. Yeah. Because we don't, you know, most of the characters that we see, they work with him every day. He's kind of a grandfatherly presence in some ways. Whereas this actor, he does such an incredible job of his first look to Leo is really showing like, I know exactly who this man is. It's a big deal that he's in this room. I'm worried actively that he's in this room.
Yeah, like what's happened? Because I've been in rooms with this guy a lot, but I've never spoken to him. Yeah. I've always been the person like handing the note to the person who hands the note to Margaret. Back to the mess, CJ Craig has arrived and is kind of like seemingly just sort of like pretty chill. There's this enjoyable back and forth between her and Toby, and which is rounded off by one of the students, Billy Fernandez, who was the first person to kind of point out that Josh was wrong.
And therefore we love him.
Yeah. Would you like to be Toby or CJ?
I will be Toby. Maybe this would be a good time for a course on our maligned little brother's civil liberties.
Liberties, schmibberties.
CJ Craig, ladies and gentlemen.
You know a way to do this without tapping some phones?
What about illegal searches? What about profiling? You know what Benjamin Franklin said?
He said, hey, look, I've invented the stove.
He said, they that give up an essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety.
Just Billy Fernandez coming in with the info at the end there.
Yeah.
I mean, shout out to Benjamin Franklin inventing the stove.
Love that for him.
But that, I think, is it's insane that they're having these conversations in front of children, but it is quite fun to watch these characters who are like making policy. And what's what we see them do in this show is like, you know, do the politics, then being like, well, where do we draw the line? How do we solve this problem without cutting in on people's civil liberties? And that at the time, I think, was probably a really big ticket issue to be discussing, like in the general public, is, okay, there's people out there that we need to find information from. So why don't we just tap everyone's phones? Let's get all that, like, that will help us stop the bad guys, quote unquote. But in doing so, you're opening yourself up to more like, I don't know, in terms of pulling apart a morally and ethically tricky conversation. I think this show does it really well with its core characters and bizarrely a group of children.
Yeah. And also just once again, Aaron Sorkin with his finger on the pulse, kind of predicting the future of, obviously this was made very soon after the September 11th attacks, but this is exactly where we were kind of headed, you know?
My moment of conjecture was, it was at this point I recognized Billy. And Billy is played by an actor who then later on in his career went on to play the character Max Miller in the 90210 remake.
Whoa.
And Max Miller was like a kind of computer nerd
Obsessed.
who like the kind of the girl's girl, the big like the most popular girl in school falls for. And she's like, what do you mean I've fallen for a nerd?
Incredible.
And I think ends up getting pregnant by him. I don't know.
Of course.
It was a crazy show. But anyway, here's to the actor. His name escapes me, but great job as a child. And also props to playing Max Miller, because that would have been a crazy job. Back to just some information about Rakeem Ali, who's working in the White House. So he was previously arrested for holding a rally without a permit. And he said, I applied for the permit, but it wasn't provided to me in time before I went to the protest. And I was also released without charge. And this is when we get into kind of, there's a ramp up, because I think Leo's like grasping at straws at this point to pin something on Rakeem. And he gets himself into a bit of a cul-de-sac with his own language. And he gets himself to a point where he says, that's the price you pay. And then kind of knows that he needs to finish that sentence, but that what he's going to say is deeply racist.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting to see that moment on this TV show, because I think we have discussed the depiction of racism and its impact in The West Wing. But there was, I don't know, it had real weight there. It was a very interesting scene to watch.
Yeah, and I think John Spencer really allowed Leo to be really very unlikable in that moment.
Yeah.
And John Spencer's performance of this whole episode really lends dignity to the experience that Arab Americans went through post 9/11.
Agreed. Back to the mess. And Charlie and POTUS have entered the chat. And I'm really glad, because, you know, Charlie as the target of racial violence in a season finale in this show, I'm really glad that he had voice in this episode.
Agreed, yeah.
And he had a moment where he talked about kind of like, we're discussing this as something that's happening, you know, across the world. But like, this is my experience of something similar to this, like growing up in DC. Which I thought was fascinating. Kind of like, they're talking about extremism and what allows extremism to happen. And he's like, you know, on a very micro level, you can see that in gang culture in America. And
100%. And, you know, we're now seeing Charlie's point proven out even more so now with the radicalization of young men online.
Yeah. Jed Bartlett arrives, just drops some absolute truth and knowledge and like beautiful writing.
The kid asks basically, isn't there something that's kind of honourable about being a martyr?
And Jed's response is, we don't need martyrs, we need heroes. And I think hero is a really loaded word to use at that time, because, you know, that's the word that was being used to describe all of the emergency service people who did so much and lost their lives and put their lives at risk to help save people.
And we didn't know yet in this moment had exposed themselves to like lifelong illness because of the toxins they were exposed to trying to save people.
And what Jed says is, a hero would die for his country, but he'd much rather live for it. And I think this is absolute classic Jed Bartlett 101. It didn't feel like that was Aaron Sorkin's words in a character's mouth. Like it felt very authentically Jed Bartlett, which I really enjoyed. We flash back one last time to the interrogation of Rakeem Ali, and news comes into the room that it was another man that they were looking for.
They found the man in Germany.
They found him in Germany. He's been detained. And what I thought was fascinating was how quickly Leo was like, okay, thank you very much for your time. You can go about your day now. And you're so right that Rakeem Ali gets a moment at the end of this.
We needed a classic Aaron Sorkin pause and turn back, which I feel like is usually only afforded to our kind of recurring characters. But we needed a moment of pause and turn back for Rakeem. He deserved his moment. He needed his moment for sure.
And he does. And he has this like really great little speech at the end as he walks out the room.
You know what, Mr. McGarry? You have the memory of a gypsy moth. When you and the president's daughter and about 100 other people, including me, by the way, were met with the hail of .44 caliber gunfire in Rosslyn. Not only were the shooters white, they were doing it because one of us wasn't. I think that's so ingenious. How great that when Aaron Sorkin had written a scene where, you know, an act of terror happened in a previous season, that he did make it not an ethnic minority or any of those other choices.
And Rakeem gets to walk out like having said his piece, which I appreciate. And we go back to the mess for a last time. And Abby Bartlett's kind of decided to hang around. Jed's gone off to go and do some work. And my kind of only moment of sort of kind of wildness in this episode was it just felt like Abby Bartlett had had a couple of glasses of wine.
I wonder if she'd had to be at like a lunch event or something earlier in the day.
I rate that if Stockard Channing was like, this is the story I'm playing. And then we kind of close out that the lockdown is lifted on the White House. And so we're kind of saying goodbye to all the school kids. And all of the characters are leaving. And Josh is like, has his final like send off with them. He says lots of really great stuff to these kids, but one particular thing that I was like, I really love that. And I just think that's really smart writing, and something that equally I think is so valuable now in 2025 is, in the meantime, remember pluralism. You want to get these people? I mean, you really want to reach in and kill them where they live? Keep accepting more than one idea. Makes them absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
And I can't express how, you know, reading the news every day, that one line for me is like what I wish for young people. You know, there's no way but to be, as a young person, like chronically online. And I'm just, sometimes I do feel like worried because there is a sense of just like absolutism. And like there is only one thought and there is only one way and there's only one opinion. And if you say the wrong thing, then you get torn down. And there are thousands of people on the internet ready to say why you're wrong. And I just think that like growing up and building your own ideas and becoming a fully rounded person is about believing loads of stuff until you find a reason why you don't.
And also just like famously, again, not to quote Amy Warren 2 episodes in a row, which is a very smart woman, our friend, 2 things can be true. We just all need to remember that 2 things can be true.
Yeah, I loved that. And actually, Bradley Whitford's performance, like signing off with those kids, I found really moving. Yes, was it worthy? It was. But the performance of it was really honest. And I mean, he's a great actor.
He's a phenomenal actor. I still can't with We Present a Play, but he backed it up with his performance.
We'll never be over We Present a Play. And in fact, it may become just something that Leigh and I say to each other when we have like a story to tell.
Yes.
I present to you this evening a play. And we sign off this whole episode with a scene that I was so unaware I needed.
Yes.
Which was a bad apology from Leo McGarry.
Yeah.
Leo goes to Rakeem's just gone back to work, to his desk. And that's heavy in itself. And then Leo goes up to him and is like, look, I just wanted to come here and say that thing that I said to you where I stopped myself and I didn't finish the sentence. This is what I was going to say. And this is what I meant by that. And I did rate that from him, you know, because it could be easy for someone of his generation to be like, I was never going to say that. So to stand up and be like, no, that was my opinion. And I want to be honest about my like racial prejudice and racism.
Yeah, I think it feels like he's started to do his work where his anti-racist work. Yeah. He started his journey by being like, okay, I now have to recognize that, like, I am racist because we are all racist. And I'm going to work on recognizing when I'm having a racist thought and unlearning it.
Yeah. I think that was something that Leo could have done that had nothing to do with Rakim. And like, part of me was like, is it interesting to see Leo go up to someone and be like, I think I'm learning, and like wait for that person to be like, well done. And then Rakim to be like, not to give him that. I thought was quite clever.
Absolutely. I think, you know, Leo McGarry in this scene, he is posting his black square. He is a pink hat feminist. You know, he is a white Karen, just quite earnestly getting it wrong. And I think that's important to see.
Yeah. And I feel like that rolls back to what we were saying about how like this episode shows how different generations are responding.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that that's great. And also, again, rolls back to kind of what we were speaking about in last week's episode, which is the great thing about this show, and something that I think Aaron Sorkin always has his finger on, is that we don't get it right every time in the Bartlett administration. We aren't the most intelligent people in politics. We are human and we make mistakes and we get things wrong and we have a lot to learn. And I think it was nice seeing a character like Leo McGarry, who is, you know, the second most powerful person in that building, fundamentally like messing up. What I didn't like, and I think perhaps was more powerful in 2001 and less powerful now, is, hey kid, waiter be back at your desk.
Yeah, I mean, it felt absolutely authentic to who Leo McGarry is as a character. But also, I think we in 2025 would recognize that if Rakim needed to take the rest of the day as a mental health day, that would be more than fair.
Yeah. But that, I think, is just the aging of the episode, you know? And then we finished the episode with an insanely good needle drop, like an unbelievable needle drop, which is Buffalo Springfield's For What It's Worth, which is an absolutely like banger of a song and lyrically very relevant, but felt like a really odd vibe change from the final scene.
Yeah, for sure.
But, you know, I'm just going to go with it. Aaron likes to do this. He's like, I've read the lyrics of this song, and if you really listen carefully, it's super relevant. So I'm going to let him have this one. And that's it, Leigh.
Beautiful.
I felt like a kind of quick fires that we do, not all of them feel right.
Yes, agreed.
So, best fashion, all I'm going to say, and I think you'd agree as well, all of the children dress like office workers.
Very fun.
Very fun. We'll love it. We'll leave it there. And I think there's several quite clear ones that we should definitely do. The first of which is really hard to choose, is best writerly moment.
Wow. I think just the setup of Josh saying the executive branch is the most powerful branch of government. I think it was such a clean, beautiful setup. It says so much about Josh as a character, and it really just allows those kids to go to town on him, which I really loved.
Yeah. I think mine for comedy props and just allowing Alison Janney to do her best work was, hey, look, I've invented the stove. Which I think is just that's a good day out as a writer to be like, what is one of the many like kind of bonkers things Benjamin Franklin did? Man, I feel like a man. I think there's a clear winner here, Leigh.
Temptation, I have named thee, and thy name is woman.
Yes, thank you, Sam Seaborn. And Leigh, what was your moment that made you proudest to be an American?
I think Rakim's kind of short monologue to Leo McGarry after his pause and turn back. Because Rakim is a patriot.
Indeed. I loved that. I also loved in Josh's sign off to the kids, one of them asks him if he's pro death penalty. And he says no. But what I would do is I would have these people, meaning terrorists, be locked up and be made to watch all of the like home videos, like birthday videos, wedding videos, holiday videos of all the people who died due to the acts that they had.
Even just you saying that back is going to make me cry.
And I actually thought that that's an incredibly powerful and emotive mental image, but it's fundamentally non-violent.
Yeah.
And I think that made me quite proud to be an honorary American. I was like, that feels like a character and a writer putting their emotion somewhere, but it not being about, you know, someone's life having to be lost. Yeah, what an ep.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that we watched it the way round that we did. So thank you to our patrons for recommending that, because I think I needed it to sort of sit by itself.
Yeah, it's a very cathartic episode for sure. Somewhat surprisingly, Fi, where we're now going to go is to Reese Witherspoon in 2007.
Take me on the journey to that choice.
So, are you familiar with a 2007 Reese Witherspoon film, also starring Jake Gyllenhaal, called Rendition?
Do you know what? I'm not. So more for me.
Now, I remember watching this film when it came out in 2007. So I would have been like early teens, and it made a real impact on me.
Meryl Streep's also in it.
Yeah, playing like a CIA woman.
Love. Okay, continue.
Now, it wasn't incredibly well reviewed, but I think as a public service, what it was doing, the kind of point it was raising, for me at least, as like an early teen girl, it was very impactful. So basically, an incident has happened. Mm-hmm. This Egyptian man who is living legally in the US and is coming home to the US after being on a business trip, has a green card, is married to an American, Reese Witherspoon, Miss America herself. As he's disembarking the plane in the United States, he's taken away by airport security. And then when they get him into like a private stairwell, a bag is put over his head and he is transported to another country where he is tortured, basically under the pretense that they believe he is in some way connected to this incident that happened.
Ah, I see.
And so the film is heavily pregnant Reese Witherspoon as his American wife has to go to her ex-boyfriend, who is a Skarsgård, who happens to now be a Senate aide, to try and work out. Her and her little boy are like waiting at the airport to pick up daddy from the airport, and he doesn't get off the plane.
Yeah.
And he's basically been snatched. And the whole film is they're now trying to bring him home. And, you know, we can say what we like about how good the film was, how well written it was. But I will just say, on like an anecdotal, personal level, it did communicate to me in 2007 the reality of what people with certain names coming from certain nations, that they had come from those countries themselves, or whether they were descendants of people who had. Yeah. It communicated to me in a way that I was able to understand at 13 or 14 what was actually happening in the country where I lived at the time. So for that reason, I think that film being made, which I think it was the first one that was made about this issue, was doing an important public service. And basically, the film is called Rendition. And rendition is the practice of capturing and transporting someone to another country without a legal extradition.
Right.
But it's not a new practice. And it was used for decades to basically bring suspects back to the US to face trial.
Okay, so you just, picking people up and bundling them onto a plane.
Exactly. And we've all seen those scenes. Yeah. And I think it is interesting, like when we look now back at the 2000s and like a post 9/11 world, I think we can look back now on, like Homeland and the Bourne franchise. And we can kind of see that so much of kind of cinema and television during this time really was as direct of a response to 9/11 as this episode of The West Wing that we just watched.
Yeah.
Basically, the first rendition that happened was actually in 1883 when Frederick Kerr was kidnapped in Peru by the Pinkerton Detective Agency and returned to Chicago to face trial for grand larceny. And that was endorsed by the Supreme Court. Now, until 9/11, the FBI published an annual summary of what they called irregular renditions, which are kind of snatch operations which may have broken local laws, but they were ultimately bringing a suspect back to like face a judge and jury.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Now, under Clinton, so we're still pre-9/11, the CIA launched a covert system of extraordinary rendition, which was to transfer suspected Islamist terrorists to foreign countries, responding basically to the fear of Osama bin Laden, which was growing at this time.
Yes.
And the goal was to basically take people off the street who were planning or had been involved with attacks on the US and its allies, and basically just sees all of the documents that they had on them at their time of arrest. And basically the idea being that, like, while some terrorists needed to face trial in the US, others should be sent to foreign countries where they might be wanted of another crime.
Right. Okay. And that was the reasoning behind, what was the terminology? The
raison d'etre of the extraordinary renditions. Now, in order to comply with the Convention Against Torture, they had to basically get assurances from the destination. And this is all feeling very topical right now with everything happening in the US. But I think it is interesting to know that it's like so grounded, actually going back to the 90s.
Yeah.
Not to say that like what is happening right now is in any way precedented or legally justifiable, because it's not.
Yes.
But ultimately, there's groundwork here. There's systems that are being put in place that what's happening now is like an explosion of. But also what's happening now couldn't exist without this.
Yeah, the path was being laid back then.
Yeah.
That now
and there's
is
no
kind
way
of,
that these people could have foreseen someone like Trump coming on the scene and just completely abuse it. Anyway, the term extraordinary rendition was never an official CIA term, but it basically has come to define how the CIA snatches terrorist suspects abroad and then transfers them without legal process to a third country for detention and interrogation. Now, 5 days after 9/11, Dick Cheney, it all comes back to Dick Cheney.
Doesn't it just?
That's all we need to remember, is like everything that's happening now is all
somehow
so
many degrees of separation away from
Dick Cheney.
Yeah.
He basically tells Meet the Press, a lot of what needs to be done here will have to be done quietly without any discussion, using sources and methods that are available to our intelligence agencies. It's going to be vital for us to use any means at our disposal, basically, to achieve our objective. And he basically warned the public that the government would have to operate, quote, on the dark side. This is as the Vice President of the United States.
Yeah.
First of all, why the hell it's him saying it and not the president, I do not understand.
Yeah.
I can't imagine any other vice president making such a huge statement. Now, basically, post 9/11, the American public don't want to see terrorists get their day in court in a US court. There's no appetite for that. So basically then White House lawyers are like, okay, under the laws of war, suspects can be held indefinitely without any trial.
Okay, There we go.
And there's several cases that you can kind of read about in 2001 and 2002, going into 2003 as well. There's a lot of kind of famous cases that you can look into where it was a case of mistaken identity and somebody essentially got snatched, and either, the person that they were with had ties to terrorist activity, but they did not, or it was literally just somebody else with their same name.
Yeah.
There was a famous case of a Canadian citizen this happened to, who was basically arrested at JFK and interrogated and then deported to Syria. There was also a case of a German national, and despite the fact that he was a German national, and at no point when he was kind of being transported was he in the US or trying to enter the US. It's all handled by the CIA.
Right. Okay.
Now, on the campaign trail in 2000, and again in February 2001, in a kind of State of the Union address, George W. Bush said of racial profiling, it's wrong and it will end in America. Now, at the time, when we're talking about racial profiling in 2000 and early 2001, before 9/11 happened, which is still an issue, sadly, in the US and many other countries today, we're actually talking about the Black and Hispanic communities and, driving while Black, which we've seen a lot, sadly, through the Black Lives Matter movement since. But the Clinton administration had intervened to try and stop racial profiling on New Jersey highway patrols. But basically, as soon as he took office, George Bush ordered the Justice Department to conduct a review of racial profiling. Now, this study was delayed because 9/11 happened.
For sure. Okay.
And then 45 days after 9/11, the Patriot Act passed. Have you heard of the Patriot Act?
Now, would this have been in Vice, the movie?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, then I think that's where I would recognize it from.
So basically, this is what changes US surveillance. So the government can monitor citizens through phone records, bank records, other personal information, as long as it's under the umbrella of counterterrorism and national security.
Yeah.
And, this is where we hear, which was, become a big thing in news since, that National Security Agency can eavesdrop on Americans' phone calls.
Yeah.
Now, the levy guidelines were implemented in the 1970s. And basically, the levy guidelines are that there's 3 tiers of an investigation. There's preliminary, limited, and full investigations. And basically, you can only do certain things if it's a full investigation. You have to have a certain amount of evidence before you call something a full investigation.
Mm-hmm.
Basically to stop these agencies going on fishing expeditions into particular protest movements or into minority communities. And basically these guidelines were put in place in the 1970s with the remit that, quote, government monitoring of individuals or groups because they hold unpopular or controversial political views is intolerable. That is then gutted in 2002 because of 9/11.
Yeah.
And so now suddenly the FBI has much more discretion to check out leads that they see as threatening without having to have evidence or facts starting out. Yet in 2003, the Justice Department finally finishes George Bush's investigation into racial profiling and decides that it is not a systematic problem.
Sure. Okay.
White House spokesman at the time, Scott McClellan, said, "The way the president looks at it, this is about stopping the abuses of a few, and today's action should only strengthen the public's confidence that the vast majority of law enforcement officials have earned and deserve credit for the job they do in protecting Americans."
There is an echo of this in modern American politics, isn't there?
Mm-hmm. Even though at the time, and this study found only 7 of the 70 law enforcement agencies had policies that specifically prohibited racial profiling.
Yeah.
And in 2003, President Bush issued guidelines barring federal agents using race or ethnicity in investigations, but he carved out exemptions for terrorism and national security matters. So Arab Americans, Muslim Americans
there was always a loophole.
Are still being racially profiled basically at every turn at this point. So a narcotics agent can't target a specific neighborhood because it has a particular racial makeup.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's a tip that something's going to happen on a particular flight, you can pull everyone who's of a particular religion or a particular race away for questioning. Yeah. So obviously, at this time, the racial profiling of Arab and Muslim Americans is just seen as widely justified.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot to be said then that basically the Department of Homeland Security is also created at this time, and they set up what were called fusion centers. And those fusion centers were given funding on a local level to almost police the community. So people are volunteering to basically be paid by the Department of Homeland Security to gather intelligence. And there's records of this happening at a marriage counseling seminar put on by a Muslim organization and at a lecture on parenting delivered by a Muslim American speaker.
It's not comfy, is it?
It's not. And then, and it's not like this is limited to the early 2000s. I was reading a story from 2011 about a man named Mohammed Bahi, who is Muslim American, whose family came to the US from Algeria. And he basically started a community volunteer group in his neighborhood in Queens called Muslims Give Back that was focused on kind of helping the homeless in the Muslim community and delivering food to families in need. And, at this point, even in 2011, so we're 10 years on, the community was very wary of outsiders. And so it took quite a while to kind of gain the community's trust, even as a member of the community himself. And then he finds out that one of the volunteers, who was a familiar face working with his organization, was a paid informant for the New York City Police Department.
Yeah, that's wild, isn't it?
He said a lot of our members were completely traumatized and disappeared. They were not even returning our phone calls because they were so scared. And I think it destroyed their morale. It destroyed everything they ever believed in, because that was one of our hopes, to give a positive image of our religion. And if we just look towards today, Ali Asani, who's a professor of Middle Eastern studies and teaches Indo-Muslim and Islamic religion and cultures at Harvard, has basically talked about how the othering of Muslims since 9/11 has had a long impact on the lives and mental health of Muslim Americans. He says, quote, both their identities were challenged, their American identity and their Muslim identity. I don't think the country has recovered from making Muslims feel like the other or the enemy, or that Muslims have recovered from the suffering they had to endure after 9/11 because they always have to prove their loyalty to the United States. President Trump's ex-national security advisor, Michael Flynn, referred to Islam as a political ideology that hides behind the notion of being a religion, which I think is one of the most abhorrent things I've ever heard.
It's so incendiary, isn't it?
Of one of the world's most ancient religions.
Yeah.
But on a positive note, in 2018, as we know, Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib became the first Muslim women elected to Congress. Only 4 Muslims have ever served in Congress. The other 2 being former Representative Keith Ellison of Minnesota, who served from 2007 to 2019, and current Representative Andre Carson of Indiana, who was elected in 2008 and is now in his 7th term.
Wow.
Musab Ali was elected to the Jersey City Board of Education in 2017. I think this is where we start to see the kind of galvanizing impact of the generation of Muslim Americans who were not yet adults when 9/11 happened, but they were raised by the Muslim Americans who were adults when 9/11 happened, the children of like the 9/11 era, if you will. He was elected to the Jersey City Board of Education in 2017, and he's the first Muslim ever elected to public office in the city.
Wow.
And he basically said that the moment he decided to run for office was in 2015, when at the time presidential candidate Donald Trump made the false claim that he had seen Muslims in New Jersey cheering when the Twin Towers came down.
Yeah. Like that was his defining moment when he was
that was his call to action. Like, I have something that I need to do. This is my calling, you know. He has spoken about, having endured kind of bullying as a child as a result of being Muslim in the wake of 9/11. And he was a pre-med student in college, but he decided when that happened to go into law and politics and counter Islamophobia and be a leading example of what it means to be Muslim.
Wow. How impressive.
Yeah. So I think what makes me incredibly proud to be an American, it's hard not to be able to say, like, we've come so far since 2001, and Isaac and Ishmael is not a historical piece of television. It is incredibly relevant still today. And I think that's incredibly hard 24 years on, that the story that we see represented by the character of Rakeem is still super relevant. But I think I feel very hopeful and very proud to be an American when I look at leaders in government and outside of government like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, who are, in spite of continued Islamophobia and continued racism, are standing up for their communities and representing their communities and making change.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I feel really glad that we watched this episode, and I understand why it holds quite a special place for West Wing lovers, not just for the great performances and the great writing, but I think what glossy American TV is trying to say, and where politically, quote unquote Hollywood, for want of a better phrase, is trying to place itself. What an interesting episode and great week of discussion.
Yeah. Also, I did a little poll on our Patreon and our Instagram. It will be quite a while ago now for our listeners, but of how they would like to be identified as listeners of the show. And I think we kind of have 2 winners, which I think we can use interchangeably.
Yes, let's.
Which is Queer Nuts and The Gaggle.
Yeah, like the press
as
gaggle.
In press.
As in of press. Yeah, okay. I'm really down for that.
Thank you very much to our 2 listeners on Patreon who's made those 2 suggestions, our 2 winning suggestions. And I hope, dear listeners, that you're all happy with being referred to from now on, from henceforth, as Queer Nuts and The Gaggle. The Gaggle of Queer Nuts, if you will.
Yeah, we can combine as well. Yeah, I like that. I like having it's nice to change. Labels can be fluid.
Okay, I'm really excited now to like get our teeth into season 3.
Me too.
We've been faffing around for quite a while, but
Thanks for bearing with us. So let's do that, Leigh. Let's meet up next week and we will do season 3, episode 3 of The West Wing.
We are Queer Gals Watch, wherever you get your socials, Queer Gals Watch on Patreon and queergalswatch@gmail.com.
Drop us a message if you'd like. Have a little.
We love hearing from you.
Pop onto Patreon and see what's happening on there. It's very fun. I mean, obviously, Leigh and I are prejudiced because obviously we put a lot of stuff on there, but there's just great chat. It's quick community on there, which we're very proud of and to be a part of. But yeah, Leigh, shall I see you next week then, shall I?
See you next week.
Ta-ta. Take care, darling.
Bye.
Bye.